Thanks for welcoming me so warmly. Yeah, 30 years of working on a project. It's what I call a long-term art project. And so there are so many different things that I could tell you about. I'm going to try to fit it into this 1 hour. Usually I have kids with me when I tell the story of Raw. Usually I have art with me. So in absence of kids and in absence of art, I've tried to filter some of the art into the presentation, and you'll hear the voices of the kids through some films that I'm going to share. Raw Artworks has a visual art program, a digital film program, and an art of words program. So hopefully between the storytelling that I bring and the art and the films and the kids, you will get a sense of what's going on. So, yes, here I am with the sheep up there, Saas-Fee on Sunday. Just to give you a frame of where I'm coming from, really, I was that close, like scratching it behind the ear, and then sort of going into this Zen place and leaning into me. It was a moment. So beautiful. It was fun. So, just to give you a frame of where I'm coming from, as you've heard, I was a student of Paolo, and that was in the mid-'80s. I went on to do, and I think also as you're hearing this, I know that when I was a student, it was always helpful for me to hear, how does a professional path evolve? How does the career roll along? So just to give you that context, I started working after graduating at a state hospital, was there for a few years. Then Raw was just a little tiny molecule like this. It was 4 hours of my life every week. I started teaching for Leslie, which I'm still doing, and somewhere along there in the early phase, I had a private practice for about 10 years. But Raw is the piece that sort of we're talking about invocation. It just kind of came and started taking more space and more space. So that was where I felt my calling to expand. The only thing that I could talk more about probably on any given day, and I want to, whoops, did I go off? So this is part of Raw, is that it doesn't have to be perfect. It won't be perfect. And the only thing I could talk about more is my sons, my boys. I'm a single mom, a proud single mom, and there's Liam and Patrick, and I just invoke them as these sort of spirits that also help animate me. Liam with his history and his drama teacher, and Patrick with the guitar that he built. So he thinks he's all that, right? Now let's hear what he plays. But these guys are, as I say, part of what really animates me. But Raw was really sort of my first baby. And there we go. This is from a piece by one of our teens, probably about 15 years ago, and I love that. Paolo, I don't know if you can read that, but it says, when I make art, it's not to get lost. Instead, when I look back on it, I finally feel my existence. And I love that. And I think that that's what keeps me drawn to this work. And to see children and teenagers get to this place where they can feel their existence through the art is really part of what really it inspires me all the time. Raw's mission statement: ignite the desire to create and the confidence to succeed. These are just some basic facts about Raw. This year we celebrated our 30th anniversary. Raw, it's not polished. Raw really came from our founder, Mary Flannery, and my coworker for more than 30 years. When she was at Leslie, she was very taken by the art brut movement, outsider art, and was very interested in art that people just have to make, not to follow the conventions of the art world, but just have to make to express what's really going on inside. So that's where she got Raw Artworks. We work with kids, As I told you, the 3 different strands of programming we have. This is any given year we're working with 500 or 600 kids on a regular basis. We also work in the community, and we'll work on any given year, depending on what we get involved in, another 1,000 to 1,500 contacts with kids. It's a very diverse population, and this is the size of our staff now. For many, many years, it was 4 people. For the first 6 years or so, it was 4 people. And that's one of the things that I just want you to remember today is that it's still raw. After 30 years in the oven, you think it's probably cooked a bit, right? And it is. So what it is now, it took a long way to get there. Really a marathon. But that is my goal is for you today. Now, everybody is going to be approaching this is differently, right? If you work with youth, you're going to take something. If you work with film, digital film, you're going to take something. I hope you can just take something, as you're doing from all your classes, to bring onto your own palette, to bring into your own practice. I hope something inspires you, like this little bumblebee I saw after I was hanging out with the sheep, and bring something back to your own garden. Remember, not suave artworks, raw. There we go. Before the beginning, Denver State Hospital, a very classic style, old state hospital. You've heard the term back wards. Well, classic psychiatric hospital architecture design was the building would be designed in a V. And so the most ill people were in the back of the V. And if and as they were rehabilitated, they would get moved closer to the front and ultimately come out the front door for those who made it out. But 2 things, 2 moments that I would share with you that really, I think, let me know that I was on the right path. So Billy, when I was working at the state hospital, I was an intern at first, and then I worked there for a couple of years. Now, as an intern, as you may know, you can get away with a lot, right? You can do some kind of wacky things. So there I was one afternoon on my belly on the floor because Billy was underneath the bed, and he was just sort of mumbling along. And I started singing a Beatles song. Now, I knew about Billy before, when he was younger, that he was a wonderful musician. And for about the next 45 minutes, Billy and I, on our bellies, on the floor, and looking at each other, sang Beatles songs. And Billy was really, really hard to make contact with. So that was a moment that touched me. Like, wow, so through this art, music, I can make contact. I was at the hospital for 3 years. And we actually built a program called the Art Workshop. It was off campus. It was not a locked program. We had the patients, who we called clients or artists, come to the Art Workshop. Paula, do you remember hearing about the Art Workshop back then? Yeah. We would have the clients build their own portfolios and then come to team meetings and present their artwork. And then we would mediate a conversation about their artwork and where they were at and how they were feeling. Sadly, in a state institution, decisions get made that they're way above my head. And it was right after Christmas, I got a note that said, we're closing the art workshop. We'll find a space for you somewhere up on the hill. Please pack up and, by Friday, kaput. And I'll tell you what, the power, we were talking about empowerment, the power of telling clients, here's your art studio, here's your portfolio, now you'll come to speak to the docs. I'm really sure that infused what happened that week. They got a petition going. Now this hospital is locked units, 4 or 5 stories high. They circulated a petition, don't close the art workshop. Somehow they got it into the admin building and they made copies of it and delivered it to the COO, the Chief Operating Officer. Well, sadly, that afternoon that it was delivered, And honestly, I promise you, I really had nothing to do with that whole subversive activity, other than helping to hold a space for an art studio. Came back into my mailbox, and with a little, this is even before Post-it notes, a little note clip to it, please make sure you're packed by Friday. So, that also sowed a seed for me of, I want to be in a place where I can rise or fall on my own merits, where the funding is not going to just be ripped away as somebody else's decision. And that really set me on a determined course. I left the hospital about 6 months later. And 6 months after that, I came back for the Christmas party. And there are the beloved clients. And there's Judy. She's making her rounds. She's walking along, sort of, talking to herself. And I joined her. And I said, Judy, do you remember me? And she looked at me, she squinted, and she said, oh, my kindergarten teacher? I said, no. We kept walking, and she said, did you used to work at the ice cream store? I said, no. And we kept walking. I said, Judy, the art workshop. She went like this. She said, the pear. Judy and I worked for weeks and weeks sculpting one pear out of brown clay. It was so beautiful. And there we met. It was like being on my belly with Billy. It's like, yes, the pear, 6 months ago and more. We made a connection. So this is what rolled forward. And sort of, I think one of our guiding questions was, by the way, we loved working with our patients. They were just, wonderful, fun. But look, these are people who are in a state hospital. They've been abandoned. They have chronic major mental illness. For many of them, there's only so much farther that they're going to progress in their life, so much impact. And we could have a lot of impact. Obviously, we made relationships with people who were, a lot of them living in so much isolation. But a guiding question, how do we have more impact? My colleague Mary, who I mentioned, studied Art Brut. She was doing a little side job, and she was working in Department of Youth Service. So in Massachusetts, that is the youth juvenile justice system. Kids in lockup. Actually, boys. She was working with boys, sex offender boys. It's not an easy group to work with. It's not an easy group to talk about their feelings, right? About what they did or about what was done to them when they were the age of their victims. But in using the art, the conversations started. Now, this was one summer that was in Boston. It was a particularly violent summer. Kids were literally killing each other for a pair of shoes. Yes. One of my girls, so I was working with girls. One of my girls, Tamika, she was this sassy lass. She was she was always ready to challenge me or challenge anybody. She was spunky, and I loved her. She would leave, and then she would do some foolishness, get involved with some guys who are robbing people or stealing cars or whatever. She'd take the rap, she's back in. She'd go out, she got pregnant, she came back in, she got out, and then she turned 18. Now, 18, that's a whole different thing. They don't really have art therapy in the women's prison. Not much anyway, or at all. And she was making it. She was making it on her own. She had her little boy back. She was hanging with her friends on Blue Hills Ave. And one night that summer, car comes up, window goes down, boom. She's dropped dead in front of her little one. So we realized, gosh, if Tamika had raw once she got out, it could have eased the transition. What if we could make a raw in the community? As a matter of fact, there were 4 of us, Mary, myself, and Bo and Cece, and we sat in our office, which was Mary's kitchen table, and we said, if the fairy godmother of arts therapies were to give us a wish, what would it be? We wrote down our wishes, we folded them up, we put them in a fruit bowl, we pulled them out, and guess what? We all wanted a raw artworks. We wanted to be there when the kids got out, or better yet, what? Before they got in. Exactly. So in 93, we started knocking on doors in the city of Lynn. Mary lived in Lynn. I lived the next town over. And just trying to get people excited about our vision. The moment that we felt like we caught people's attention was the shoe show. So we had our kids in DYS do a body of work, and the question, the guiding question, and this is how we work. We're always asking a question. The question was, if you were killed tomorrow, who would fill your shoes? Now, shoes. Lynn, Massachusetts, was the first city in America to become, it was called Shoe City, to become a major manufacturing center for shoes. So we've got the shoes, we've got the art, we've got, and powerful art, and we got the attention. There was an article written up in the Globe. Somebody came from a local business and said, you know what, if you can find a place to plant yourself, we'll cover the rent for 2 years. And so it started. There's Mary and I, raw space, day one, February 1st. We became known as those two art girls. We really had no money. We had promises to pay rent, and we had never written a grant, but we had space. It was awesome. And we had buckets of paint. We had buckets of black paint, so we were going to go and roll the floor and paint the floor. So we took this picture, and then we got open our paint and got ready to put it into the pans. It was so cold. We had no money for heat. The paint was frozen. So, you know, that's how it started, with sort of two art girls and always being driven forward. How do we have a greater impact in young lives through the arts? This is just a little overview of the challenges in Lynn. This is our neighborhood. Keep this building in mind. We'll come back to that a little bit longer. Elizabeth lives around that corner. That's your view. and Raw is right here. But you see, it's a really challenging urban environment. It's about 90,000 people. And our kids have to really fight to make it. So this felt like a good place to be. You know, almost like Danvers State Hospital. The place was so bad, so archaic, that it also attracted people who were up for a challenge and really good and creative minds. Lynn, similar. Really a down on its luck city. There was a series of factory fires in the 70s, the malls, the town has, when we got there in 94, it was really just collapsed in on itself. So we started with one group of kids. We wrote a grant. We had no idea what a grant even was. We were fortunate. We were funded for 2 years, and we started a group called Raw Kids. And Deck, I'm thinking about the pilot that you want to do. You say, if I can just start with a small group of kids. So we started with 16 kids. We'd see them twice a week, once in a small group, 8 in the morning, 8 in the afternoon, and then as a large group, 16. And we just started with that question of what's really going on. Now, building a safe space, introducing playfulness through art materials, these kids started to form up a group. They started to share what was really going on. And an interesting thing happened. After about 9 months of this, they really were kind of in the flow, working with each other, working with their art. But we would see them. We had an old jalopy van, call it Van Go. We painted over the rust. And you know, we would roll out to the alternative high school. These were kids from alternative high school, by the way. And you know, we'd drop our kids off, and we'd see this move, like your hands come down, and you know, no longer standing tall. And they're slouching. Look at all that. And we realized they have to do that. They have to do that to survive, right? They can be one way at Raw, but they've got to be another way when they're back on the street. So we reflected that back to them. We said, do you kind of feel like there's one version of you here, another version? And they, you know, we played with that. We dialogued about that. So this is our very first exhibit. It's called Inside Outside. You may or may not know what these large bags are. They're lawn leaf bags. If you mow the lawn, you put the clippings in there. They stand about this tall. So the mission was, what is your outside self, and then what is the inside self? And we just took little lunch bags, little lunch sacks, and they could hide them all the way up inside, or let them peek out a little bit, or, let them show more. And then on the stands, we had them put some words to that. We always play with art and words together. So these are some of the things that were painted on the boards. Outside I'm hard, inside I'm soft. Outside I'm loud, inside I want to hide. I'm mean, I'm scared and scarred. And so what we also realized when we did this exhibit was, and we invited whoever would come, and so probably, maybe 50 people came. And there was Jeff. You can't see Jeff's piece. Jeff had this big, long bow tie on his piece. And when he would invite people to come, and he told me in the middle of the opening night, he said, "Kid, I've already done 6 interviews." And the importance for our kids to be seen and heard, and for their artwork to serve as part of their voice, it was a beautiful thing. So that we realized is, okay, this is something that we will do. We don't do it continuously. And where we got to is we'll do 1 exhibit per year. So through the whole year, there are many things going on that never see the light of outside the studio. But once a year, we come together and we do an exhibit. This is our exhibit the next couple of years. Colors have feelings too. So our challenge to the kids was to animate a color. This was my group, Little Brown. So I was working with a group of 4 kids, and we developed this story about Little Brown who felt bad because he was brown. And this was something 20 years ago that our kids are dealing with. And so we wrote, where is it? He's holding the book. It's a big book like this. We wrote the story of Little Brown and how beautiful mud can be, how beautiful fallen leaves can be, and the beauty of brown. Little Brown still hangs out at Raw, and sometimes the big book will be shared with our little kids. But again, one of the things about Raw is we like to work big. We can also work small and intimate, but we find that our kids like a loud voice. We have one more exhibit. Yeah, this was windows. So this is Erin's piece, and she speaks freely about it. These were shuttered windows, so you can see the first images of her windows closed. She speaks freely about the abuse and the trauma that she suffered as a child. And then when you open the shutters and the windows, and there are smaller paintings of that time in her life and of also starting to move through. So this is also art that's not just stick figure art. The people who work at Raw really are artist therapists. And we find that that's it's such a wonderful grounding for the kids to work with, real art concepts. Okay, I told you when we were leaving Danvers, how do we have a greater impact? When we decided that DYS, working with kids in lockup, was not good enough, how do we have a greater impact? So we came to Lynn, and we were working with high schoolers. That was kind of our jam, right? Because we'd been working with teenagers in lockup. But we realized, I think it was one day when we went to pick up our high schoolers, there was a kid at the stop who, no older than 9 years old. And he goes, he was like 11. He goes, I'm almost a teenager. So we said, well, if we can have impact with teens, what if we work a little further, upstream and work with middle schoolers? So we expanded the programming to work with middle schoolers. The other thing that we did was, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, but one of my students, one of my interns, Jason, at that point, Raw was really still so small. We were renting one floor of this old factory building, and we had rented another floor, but we really had hardly any room. So my poor Leslie student had to have supervision with me in the basement. We'd huddle around a space heater So that's just to show you, like, for a long time it can be scrappy and still in formation. He said, you know, I would love the chance to work with boys only as a male and talk about, through the arts, what it is to be becoming a man. So this was the inspiration of, and the passion of one of our staff members. So we said, let's go with it. So that was in 88, 89. He started Men to Be, and it's a group that still is going strong. So again, always driven by impact and what are the new inspirations that we can come up with. All right. You know, we realized that we were losing some kids off the top, the older kids. Why were we losing them? What did they have to really do after school? They had to work. Were they working just so that they could go and buy some, like, new clothes? No. They were working to support their families. They were working to help pay the electric bill. They were working to help put food on the table. And at the time, Jason was just coming on very part-time. Primarily the staffing was 3 women, all white, no Spanish speaking. Many of our kids are Spanish speaking. So you put all this together in the bowl and you mix it up, and what do you come out with? What if raw could be the job for the kids? Okay, we piloted it, and in piloting it, we pilot everything. We start small. So our many mistakes can be small mistakes, right? And then we decide, you know, shall we dare to go bigger and have maybe bigger mistakes and maybe bigger successes too. So we piloted this. We had 3 kids, and they were placed in groups, and we had our kids always writing journals afterwards. So Shane, lovely kid, he was left alone when he was about 4. His parents were severe heroin addicts. The apartment caught on fire. He was burned over 90% of his body. So skin grafts and so forth. This is a kid who struggled just to show up, just to be looked at. So putting him in front of a group with an art therapist or expressive therapist, this was a huge move for him. And so we read his journal, and he writes, well, I was done with group. I'm walking downtown, and 3 blocks that way, I see some of my kids. I see some of my kids. And I had just lit a cigarette. What am I going to do? I can't let my kids see me smoking. I had to get rid of the cigarette. It was my last cigarette. So, what a beautiful, right? Win, 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 win. So he's now elevated. He's got a place of importance. We can now work with more kids in a group. Our little ones are seeing kids who look like them and who are from the neighborhood in a leadership position. And so that was one of our pilots that we opened up. And we opened it up to about 16 kids. So once a week they deploy into their groups. And the other time a week, they have their own. It's kind of like their core group. So they're working on their own art. They're doing learning leadership skills. But it really has allowed us to work with more kids in any given group. Elvis, I love. He's one of our raw chiefs. He's actually going into his 2nd year in college now. But he's like this gentle giant. He stands 6'3", I think. And just dedicated. He works with the middle school boys group. And you see what can happen on any given day. He's a love. How do we have greater impact? Well, if we're working with high schoolers, and we move upstream and work with middle schoolers, shouldn't we work with maybe the littles? So we have the teens, the middles, and the littles. And oh my gosh, it's beautiful. The energy that they bring. And they have really enriched what we do. Let me go back a minute. Sorry. Go back. Okay. You have to realize, in the beginning, we were just doing. We were covering it all. We were just balls of energy. We weren't talking about what we were doing. We weren't even really understanding. We were doing it. We knew, but we weren't really putting words around it so much. So if you can just help me out with this one piece. At a certain point, we realized this all had to do with how do you measure impact, right? And your funders want to know the numbers, and they want to know, how do you know that it's working? We should be able to tell them. If they're giving us $10,000, $25,000, we should be able to give them some data. So we actually got together with another 4 youth arts programs in Boston, greater Boston area, a dance program, a theater, a music, and a medicine wheel. They do ritual and performance art. And it took us a full year, but we realized in working hard together, a full year, and sharing our practices with each other, that really all of us are helping our kids say 3 things. So the first one is, I am. So if I offer that out to the group, I am. I am, how would you finish that sentence? Just popcorn. I am okay. I am unique. I am learning. More. I am free. I am here. I am tired. Inspired. I am inspired. I'm tired too. So through all of our work, we're all, whether it's music, dance, drama, we're all helping our kids say I am. The second was I create. Okay? So how do you finish that sentence? I create beauty, meaning, poems.
My life.
I create my life.
My path.
I create my path.
Peace.
I create peace. And then the third sentence starter, if you will, is I connect. So I connect, how do you, I connect lives. Who else? Who hasn't said? I connect lines. I connect. Sorry? I connect gaps. I connect smiles.
Ideas.
I connect ideas. I connect with you. I connect stories. So we realized, and again, it took us a year. And this is something in our practice, every once in a while, and not infrequently, we try to go back to the beginning, right, and ask the most fundamental questions. We're asking ourselves, like we ask our kids, what's really going on? So we began to be able to articulate what it is that we're doing, or why, how, and what. Why? Why do we do this? Because we really believe that kids need to be seen and heard. The core belief. By the way, I noticed some people taking photos. I will send all of this material. Margot, may I send it to you? And you can make it available somehow? Because there are some links in here and so forth. So, awesome, great. How do we help our kids be seen and heard? Using art and therapy. It's really interesting. You know, the labor pool from which we can draw, I mean, you're all over the world, right? It's not easy to find artist therapists who are also very grounded in therapeutic work. So it's been one impediment to growth. And what, at the end, what comes out the other end, hopefully, is the kids are able to connect and to succeed, however success is defined by them. You know, when we started in Lynn in 1994, kids were, hard maybe to look one another in the eye, hard to connect. With this business, this one here, right, ever more difficult for kids to connect. Sometimes they walk in and it's like, gosh, all these little bubbles in their own bubble screen world. And so we kids walk in, they put the screen world away. But this is what we hope. This is how we define success. Are kids able to connect to one another and succeed on whatever that path is that they are shaping for themselves? So yes, I create, and I connect. And oftentimes when a staff is having a trouble, like, I don't know, this concept isn't really clear, we say, look, does it somehow connect to one of these? I am, I create, I connect. And sometimes that's very clarifying to staff. Okay, so I'm just going to show you one slide that when I mentioned this work with the other organizations, as we were trying to build an evaluation system that was inherent to the arts. We're just going to take a look at that first slide because the second one is actually quite dense. But this is how, with our work, with the Boston Youth Arts Evaluation Project, BIAP, it's not really that catchy, but we took those 3 areas, I am, I create, and I connect, or we connect, and we put together this sort of theory of change. If we help our kids in those 3 areas, we're going to, actually, does this, woo, look at that. We find that our kids are able to engage and be productive, able to make connections, to navigate their world, and ultimately, you know, this center spot, kids develop resiliency, self-efficacy, fulfillment, and community engagement. This is a model, just a model. I'm actually eager to kind of take this to the next step. We've shared this model, and a lot of organizations have used it as a sort of a jumping off point. So I just offer it as an example. And again, yeah, we can move on. You'll have this resource. Right, enough said. So, okay, year 2000. So Steve, we talk about Stand Up Tall. It's a wonderful award called the Coming Up Taller Award, presented by the National Endowment for the Arts. We took a run at it. I think we had to be nominated. We took a run at it the first year that it started in '98. We didn't get this award. It's youth arts programs across the entire country. The second year we said, you know, we really think that we're doing good work. Second year we made it into semifinalists. We don't give up. It's another thing. Just don't give up. And third year, we were selected. So what a wonderful honor. One of the top 10 youth arts organizations in the country. The last Kennedy, who's no longer with us, Teddy Kennedy, we got to meet. Bill Ivey, the chair of the National Endowment of the Arts. We took 5 of our kids. We hand-painted these tuxedo lapels, and we just had a ball being in Washington. The problem was, at that point, so we're working with our high school kids, our middle, our littles. We also had expanded to the local soup kitchen and women in substance use recovery and the elders. And honestly, if anybody came to us and said, hey, could you work with our people, especially if they had money to fund that, it was like, yeah, sure, that sounds good. We'll try that. So what did that lead to? Burnout, right? Burnout. And so in year 2000, we took a pause. So that's really so important. It's just organic, right? At a certain point, after growth, there needs to be not necessarily contraction, but a rest period. So we did that, and we realized on this side, as we took our pause, stay with our strength. Our strength is really, our strongest muscle is the youth work. And this is something that we never saw. You know, you can be in it and you can never see it. Our programs, so our littles, our middles, and our high school programs can actually create this flow intentionally. We never saw that. It took somebody from the outside. We got money for a consultant. And he said, do you realize you can create this continuum so that DeAndre can start when he is 7 years old, and he can be with those leaders for a couple of years, and he can move as a middle schooler into the next level, and move in. This was revolutionary to us. But that's one of the things that we realized when we took a pause. We can create. Now, kids don't have to stay in. Not all kids stay in through the whole flow. Kids can disappear and come back. Some kids we don't get until they're maybe in 8th grade. But these were important moments of clarity for us. I guess he was a clarifier for us, Elizabeth. On the other side here, we realized, what is it that helps? Because there's growth, like how weeds grow all over the place, and then there's intentional growth. So we realized what gives us the strongest growth is that we either start from the needs and the assets of our kids. What do they tell us they want? Where are they excited to go with us? The passions, so that really, like, the kids needed jobs, right? So we created Raw Chiefs. The passions of our staff, so there was Jason, like, I want to work with single gender. So he started the high school boys group. Right now, we have high school boys, we have 2 high school boys groups, a middle school boys group, 3 high school girls groups, a middle school girls group, and our little Mariposa. It's a little elementary school, all girls groups. So that's organic growth that is guided by some logic. I call it the 3-legged stool, and I like that one because it looks like the sheep and the goat I've been hanging out with. Coming into the current century, here's an example of the third one that I didn't mention, the growth as guided by the resources in the community. Okay, so really quick story I told Marcus yesterday. This never should have happened. Total coincidence. Jason, who started the all-boys groups, he was working on the side. So for years and years and years, we all had sort of 3 jobs, patching together. He was at one of his moonlighting jobs. He ran into a filmmaker. I mean, she just happened to be there that day. She wanted to make a film about youth. He said, geez, once I'm done with my shift here, I want to bring you up to Lynn so you can see a place where it's really going on. She was a very interesting character. She was young, and she was kind of all over the globe. She was excited about doing this film. And as I said to Marcus yesterday, she was the one with 2 cell phones before any of us had cell phones. So she's like a whirling dervish. Joanna. Well, and then she dropped out of sight. About 9 months later, she sort of resurfaced. And she said, I've just become a member of the Family Foundation. I'm too busy right now to do anything else, but I know you lost some funding in the Bush era. Write us a grant. And I said, oh, okay, well, when can I send it to you? She said, I'd like it tomorrow. She's this kind of person. So when you don't like the answer, you say, well, I will just, we'll take a look at that film on home. This was focusing on the visual art. There were also 10 film projects that bundled into this whole suite. There's a handout, and I think we're going to skip over that handout, but I'll make it available to you. Number 3. When we put up an exhibit, we'll always have a little bit of a gallery guide. And I'm not going to go through this because there's a lot of content here, but you'll have this electronically so that you can see. And what I like about how we organize this one is every body of work gives you right up front the guiding question, right? And that is just a way that we have come to work is form it up into a guiding question, and then to see the many different ways, even within one group, that kids take it. And then we'll go to the next one. If you are interested, again, this was pretty bold to approach Adobe with a very large size grant request. And this is a lesson. We asked for a grant of $150,000, and they had told us, think big, big, big. So if somebody says think big, please think big, okay? And it was so big, our thinking, that they wrote back to us and they said, we love it. We're not going to give you $150,000. We're going to give you $225,000. So if invited to think big, think big. People can always scale down their response. But again, we won't go through this. It was a super honor. You can go online and look up Adobe Creative Catalyst, the 1324 project. they're creating a global platform for youth aged 13 to 24 to share films, to challenge each other to make new films. So this was a 10-part film project that we said we will do not only these 10 different film projects, and we'll get our visual arts people, and we will, so now we can go back to the deck, and we'll get our poets involved. And so it was really immersive for 18 months, and really, really super exciting. So you see there the book. This was our poets, and some of the work that you did also with our poets. Elizabeth is in there. In our when we expanded at our 25th anniversary, I didn't even say that. When we turned 25, we knocked a hole in the wall to the building next door, and expanded our space by about another 5,000 square feet, including a basement where we've set up a print shop, a letterpress print shop. So this book, all the poems written by the youth, letterpressed, unpressed, and hand-bound into books. And this was the night that we opened up the exhibit. We always have a block party. We close down the block. Elizabeth, you've been there. Yes. And with music and dancing, we just party. It's a lot of fun. This here, these were Jason, our clinical supervisor. This is a little peephole into the home of imagination. And we have about a dozen of those in Central Square. On the other side, which you can't see, there's a lucite window so you can look into it. So that was fun, something that we hadn't done before involved the entire building. Okay. You'll see these are some of the, we organize each body of work inside of a little house. Again, back to the warm-ups. This is all cardboard. We just made these cardboard cities as warm-ups. This one over here, these are all lights that the Raw Chiefs made, and the question was, how are you a light in your home? Your home, your house, your home, your community. And this was one of my favorites. We got funding to send out 3 traveling teams. One went to El Salvador, one went to Dominican Republic, and one went to Cambodia, back to the homelands where our kids' parents came from. And they were teams of 4, 2 staff and 2 kids on each team. And they took all this footage of these homelands and formed them into films. We then took them into the city of Lynn, and we were projecting them. So remember when I said that the old postcard, I said, remember this building, the Flatiron in the middle of the square? That's this. They were in the middle of redoing the building, so it was wrapped. It's like, perfect, that looks like a screen to us. So we projected it on that. We projected on the front of City Hall. So, the stories of the homelands being projected onto City Hall. We set up on the road that kind of goes fast by Lynn on 1A. We set up in an empty field, just a giant, set of sheets, and we projected one night onto that. So, going big, going loud, our kids being seen and heard. And it's not just seen and heard. It's, as came in one of those, every kid has a story to tell, so eliciting those stories. Alejo, we won't go to the PDF. There is a PDF that shows you the guiding questions behind the current body of work. It's elements. So this girl it's hard to see, but there's some iron in here. She talks about the element of iron. And so I've gone way beyond the amount of time I wanted to take in the talking because, so these are thoughts to leave you with. Okay, and fun images. This is so important. This is Jason, our clinical supervisor. That's his artwork. I find this so important. When I was a student, I said there's a great article by Pat Allen about the art therapists keeping art and their own studio work going, even in the workplace. So I think that's really important. That's me. Stay connected to the work no matter what your job. This is Masi. Masi was a student in Project Launch, and she was our first staff member. This is her transition. She went to move to New York City, so surrounded by her seniors who all get their raw hoodie as part of their ritual of graduating during the block party. We're celebrating her, and I mean, come on, right? Gertrude Valdez, who was in my core group, she and I was in her peer group. And when we would meet weekly, Paolo had us meet weekly for peer group, she'd lay out the the scarf probably, and put some fruit, and she'd say, "What are we celebrating this week?" She'd say, we can always have something to celebrate. So I think, despite the challenge, the tough aspects of our work, there's always something to celebrate, as I experience here. And so I think the importance of that, it keeps us vibrant as staff people who, as everybody in here works so hard. So to take those moments to celebrate. And I was talking to Paolo the other night, and Paolo, I said, we were talking about art that just, it gets you. So this was during, I think this was 2000, I'm not quite sure when, 8 maybe, recession. The families that had very little had even less. The families that had nothing had even less than nothing. So we worked with cardboard only. That was the only material that we worked with. And Damien was working on this piece for a long time, coming out of a paintbrush. And the words got laid in at the last minute. And as I was coming in one day, it was right before the exhibit, so we were all just really hustling. I sort of flew by the piece and I realized, whoa, wait a minute. He put the letters in, so what does it say? Even when it feels like there is nothing, there is raw. He put raw in the middle there. Just, come on. It just stopped me, dropped me, stopped in my tracks. I just started. One of my many, many favorite pieces. So I think that's it. It might be hard to read this, but I want to read it out loud. Paolo, thank you for believing me in the beginning and always. Thank you, Raw staff and Raw artists, for inspiring me all the time. Thanks to Alex and Kate at home for sending me images and words for this presentation. Alejo for support and good practical ideas on putting this presentation. And thanks to you, my current and my future colleagues in the field, and all the work that you do.